Hi, my name is Karla Gorena, and today I'm going to show you how to perform an Annexin PE 7 AAD assay. First things first, when you're in the lab, you want to be wearing your lab coat and have some gloves on. We're going to go ahead and grab our cells out of the incubator. These cells have been plated and treated prior to. All of our wells have been labeled 1 through 8 to correspond to the samples that we'll be running today. We also do have some 5 ml fax tubes that are also labeled 1 to 8. So I'm going to transfer the cells from the plate into the tubes. Good lab practice is to switch tips between samples to ensure you don't have any cross-contamination. As you transfer cells, you also want to make sure to have a system where you move the newly transferred tube into a different spot so you don't transfer cells into the same tube by mistake. Once our cells are transferred, we're going to wash twice with PBS, cold PBS. When adding PBS, I won't change tips as long as the tip stays out of the tube that I'm transferring into. I'll be back now. I'm going to go spin these down, and we're going to do this twice. So we will be washing twice with PBS. Once the cells have been washed twice with PBS, we will discard the supernatant and add 1 ml of binding buffer to each sample. You can gently decant the supernatant, being very careful not to disturb the cell palette at the bottom of the tube. The cell palettes will be very difficult to see, so don't panic. If you don't see anything at this point. You might not see anything until you get on the flow cytometer.
Mana mana. Mana mana. Mana mana.
After I've added the binding buffer, I'll gently vortex each sample to make sure my pellet is resuspended. The cells are now at a concentration of 1 million cells per ml. For this assay, we will only be using 1 × 10⁵ cells per ml. So I will go ahead and transfer at this point 100 microliters from these sample tubes into a new set of tubes. Again, be sure to change tips between every sample. Now we will proceed by adding Annexin PE and our 7 AAD to our samples. With 100,000 cells in each sample, we're now ready to start adding the Annexin PE as well as the 7 AAD. We're going to add 5 microliters of each of the dyes to each of the corresponding tubes. Remember, the first tube will be unstained, so So we will add no dye to this tube. The second tube will be Annexin only. So we will go ahead and add Annexin to the second tube.
Mana mana. Mana mana. Mana mana.
Third tube is PI only. So we'll skip that one. The fifth tube will be a biological PI control. And tubes 7 and 8 will be our experimentals. This is a small volume, so you do want to make sure to get right down into the sample and pipette up and down a couple of times. Now we're going to add 5 microliters of the 7 AAD. Again, the first tube is unstained, the second tube is Annexin only. The fourth tube will also be an Annexin biological control, so we'll only be adding to the tubes in the back. Our PI only control.
Mana mana. Mana mana.
Our PI biological control.
Mana mana. Mana mana. Mana mana.
Our double stained control.
Mana mana. Mana mana.
And our 2 experimentals.
Mana mana. Mana mana. Mana mana.
We'll now allow our cells 15 minutes at room temperature in the dark for staining, and we will cover them from light by wrapping them in foil. Make sure the sides are completely contained from letting in light as well.
Mana mana. Mana mana.
After the cells have been incubating in the dark at room temperature for 15 minutes, we're going to go ahead and add 400 microliters of binding buffer, and we'll be ready for analysis.
Mana mana. Mana mana. Mana mana.
Once your cells have been stained and resuspended in binding buffer, a good practice to follow is to filter your cells if your cells tend to clump or aggregate. The BD 5 ml cell strainer cap tubes are awesome for this.
Mana mana. Mana mana.
All you do is vortex your sample and transfer.
Mana mana. Mana mana. Mana mana.
Gently through the cap that has that strainer. Your sample has now been strained and is ready to go on any flow cytometer, clump-free. This is all for today. Thank you for visiting my site, and I hope I helped you learn how to stain cells with Annexin PE and 7-AD.